1. This happened to me when I was around 16 or 17 in the early 80s. I was living with my mum in Margate, a seaside town in Kent, England. A girl was raped in a large park in the centre of town. This is horrific enough, but it happened at gunpoint. Gun crime is mercifully rare in the UK, outside the major cities, so this caused a real outcry. Anyway, the guy wasn't caught, so just about every woman was carrying a rape alarm. We were living in a ground floor apartment in a pretty quiet part of town. It was on a really long, straight street, and my boyfriend lived about 200 yards away. If I was going to his place, he would stand outside his house and watch me coming, and when I left, he would stand outside and watch until I got home. Don't ask me why he couldn't just walk me there and back. Chivalry wasn't his strong point. I should explain a bit about the layout of the outside of the apartment. There were French windows leading from the living room out into a tiny courtyard. A main road formed the back of this courtyard, and it was pretty steep. I'm not saying you couldn't access it, but you'd have to be pretty determined. I knew that someone had accessed the courtyard in the summer because I'd had some underwear stolen off the washing line. I was 17, and nothing bothered me. I'd just laughed this off rather than think it was creepy. The only other access was a 7-foot-high wooden gate that was always kept locked. The only other access to the apartment was the front door. Anyway, one night I was home alone. My mum was out and not due home until late. I always kept the front door and the French windows locked when I was home alone. I'd just been sitting watching TV, and when it got to be about 11 p.m., I decided to go to bed. I had literally, and I mean literally, just switched the main light out when someone started rattling the handles on the French windows. I immediately turned the lights back on and the rattling stopped. Fuck. Someone was out there. The curtains were closed, and there was no way on God's earth I was going to open them. We had no telephone in the apartment, so I couldn't call the cops, my mum, anyone. I shut myself in the bedroom and pushed the bed against the door. Those French windows were pretty flimsy, and locked or not, all it would take was for someone to give them a hard shove and open them. I didn't hear anything else, but I wasn't going to investigate. My mum came home about an hour later and went to the phone box to call the cops. They came out and took a statement, but there was no evidence that anyone had been out in the courtyard. I brushed off the incident as a bit weird, but hey, nothing I could really do about it. The upshot was that a few months later the rapist was caught. He was a 19-year-old guy who lived right next door to us. He would have known that there was a 17-year-old girl living in our apartment, and that she was quite often alone in there. So much for my boyfriend thinking I was safe walking 200 yards at night. When he was interviewed by the police, they asked whether he knew me, and he just laughed and said, "Oh yeah, so creepy rapist guy who tried to get into our apartment that night. Let's hope we never meet." 2. When I was 20, I joined the Royal Air Force. Our 6-week basic training was at RAF Swinderby, a god-forsaken, rain-swept wilderness in Lincolnshire, England. All us trainee girls lived in one grim grey block, appropriately enough called Grey Block, after some important RAF guy or other. We all slept about 8 to a dormitory, and there were 6 dormitories, so there were quite a lot of us living there. We all had to take turns at being duty airwomen once during our basic training. It meant we were responsible for checking that everyone was in the block, as opposed to at any of the airmen's blocks, and in bed around 11 p.m., and that the doors were locked. Although we all slept in dormitories, the duty airwoman had a room to herself just for that one night. Anyway, it was my turn. I was enjoying the luxury of having some time on my own. I spent the evening reading and listening to music, after I had checked everyone was where they should be. I locked the doors, one at the front, one at the back, and went to bed. Around 1 a.m., I was awoken by the sound of footsteps. This wasn't someone sneaking around. They were the clear sound of measured footsteps, a man's heavy footsteps, the distinctive sound of a man wearing RAF-type shoes on highly polished linoleum flooring. Then I heard the heavy internal double doors swing open and closed. Shit, there's a man in here. I jumped out of bed and ran into the hallway. But there was no one there. I checked the laundry and even the bathroom, cautiously pushing open the doors of every bathroom stall. Nothing. I went upstairs, again checking all the communal rooms, but the place was totally still. Sleeping. I went back to my room thinking that my imagination was playing tricks on me. Then, about 30 minutes later, I heard it again. Exactly the same, a man's heavy footsteps and the internal doors swinging open and shut. I should point out that I didn't think this was something spooky. To be honest, I wondered if it was some sort of test to check that the duty airwoman was on the ball. The block was fairly large, and even though there were close on 50 girls living there, pretty spooky in the dark. I went and woke up my friend Lizzie. Lizzie, I'm sure there's a man in the block, but I can't find him. Please come and check with me. Poor Lizzie was still more than half asleep, as she trailed me around, checking in the dorm rooms, the laundry room, the TV room. Nothing. All the doors and windows were locked, and no sign that anyone who shouldn't have been there had ever been there. I went back to my room, and throughout the night I heard the footsteps, the door swinging open, but I just thought, to hell with it, and tried to sleep as best I could. The following morning I had to report to the corporal. So, was everything okay? Nothing untoward? She asked. I felt like a bit of an idiot, but I told her the whole story. The footsteps, the doors, dragging poor Lizzie out of bed. Oh, I wouldn't worry, said the corporal with a laugh. That'll be the ghost. No idea who he is, or more specifically was, but he frequently keeps the duty airwomen awake. He's probably an old warrant officer who wants to make sure you WAFs are doing your job. Whoever he was, he certainly made sure I was on the ball that night. To be honest, I wasn't afraid. I had genuinely thought it was a flesh and blood man wandering about, and I was more annoyed than anything. The idea of a ghost, though, doing the rounds, that was pretty cool. 3. I've always had pretty strange, creepy things happen in my life. But one that comes to mind the most is when I was about 15. So, about 7 years ago. Here is a little backstory about me before I start. I'm a female, and have always been a bit, well, in doubt, and have never really been able to tell people no. And I have always been a bit naive in always trusting people. So now that you know that about me, I can finish my spiel. So it started out like every other day on my holiday from school. Mom and I needed to go to the grocery to get things ready for a little get-together we were having at the house. It was some sort of movie outing. So we get to the grocery, and I really wanted something just a bit sweet, so I got some biscuits. And at the corner of my eye, I see a guy in blue pants, a red hoodie, and cap on. I just brush it off, and continue to choose which biscuit I wanted. But then I notice the guy keeps coming closer and closer to me, until he's right behind me. He all of a sudden stops, has his back to mine, and he started spraying some sort of cologne, which smelled like a weird mint mixed with musk, and proceeds to ask me, "Doesn't that just smell so good?" As he turned and looked at me to see my face, I tried to ignore him and just say, "Yep." And I just grabbed whatever was closest to me and start walking away. The man then grabs my hand and says, "I see you like sweets too. How old are you anyways?" The man looked like he was in his mid-40s to 50s, and had the most dead eyes. Most people thought I looked older than what I was despite how small I was. It's mainly because, like I said, I've always been very well endowed. Anyways, I glare at him, and I rip my arm out from his and started to run to my mum. I start searching for her frantically, and when I find her, I could hardly even talk. She instantly knew something was up. All the color in my face was gone. I was finally able to catch my breath and tell her what happened. She kept me as close as she could and started looking for him to keep him away. I look down the main path and see him searching down all the aisles looking for me. His dead eyes reach me, and we just glare at each other. And Mum, as brave as she was terrified, and started calling out for the manager. The manager comes running, and we explain what happened. And the manager hunted the guy down, and grabbed him and threw him out the door, and escorted us to our car. As we were leaving the grocery, we noticed a car following us with tinted windows. My mum took a few different turns down tight alleyways and sharp turns. We finally lost them. Then I shit you not, I got a random text from a number and it read, "That wasn't very nice what you did. I only wanted to talk to you." He said my name. I did enjoy what time we got to spend together. I will see you again, my sweet. I have no idea how the fuck that twat got my number, or how he knew my name. And ever since, every year on my birthday, I get a birthday card that has nothing written in, just signed, "My sweet." Even after moving to 2 different houses and even into a different town. May we never meet again, creepy guy. 4. I was a teenager around the age of 17 to 18 when this happened. I'm 35 today. I had been out partying and was on my way home alone at night. I often walked home alone and never had any bad experience with that until this night. I was walking along open road when at some point I looked behind me and noticed a guy in his 20s walking around 50 meters behind me. Somehow I already knew then something was wrong, although he kept such a huge distance. I tried speeding up, and he did the same. When I went back to my normal pace of walking, he did the same. Constantly, he kept the same distance no matter what pace I walked in. As mentioned earlier, it was a big open road, and there were a lot of lights and a lot of houses, so it's not a good place to attack anyone. Halfway through the open road, I had to take a right turn to get to my home. This took me away from the open road and down some small, darker roads with lots of hiding places where no one will see you. Down this smaller road are 3 roads. I lived at the very last. The guy turned too, and once we came down this darker road, he started walking faster to try to get closer to me. At this point, I was 100% sure I was being stalked. Besides, this was a small neighborhood where I knew everyone, and I had never seen him before. I walked as fast as I could past the 2 first roads and down to my main road. I lived in the first house on the corner. I turned the corner and looked back. He had passed the second road as well and could only turn at my road now. I hurried up my steps so I reached the side of the house, since it was on a corner. I then got a blind spot since the houses were now between me and him, and I ran as hell before he took those few steps where he would be able to see me again. I ran into the driveway and hid behind my parents' car. I was too scared to try and unlock the door, since I knew it would take some time and he might get there and see me. I was hiding behind the car, constantly peeking out, and he never passed the driveway. He must have gotten to my road and seen that I was gone, and then turned around and walked back out of the neighborhood again, instead of looking for me. I stayed behind the car for around 5 minutes before I finally went to the door and unlocked it to get inside. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to my latest subscribers video. I know, there's 4 stories in this one instead of 3. But I had 4 there. Seemed a shame to record 3 and leave that one all on its own. I didn't want it to get lonely. So, 4 stories today. Also, I don't think I actually mentioned it in the stories. But stories 1 and 2 were actually shared by the same person. Okay, let's see where we're at now. Right, well, tomorrow will be true scary stories again. Thursday, I've got a couple of options for. I'm just kind of going back and forth on what I want to do. Friday should be paranormal. I'll have to check to see what I've got saved. If not, I should be able to source a few stories over the next few days. And Saturday's still open at the moment. I'll update you as I get closer if I pick something in advance. Okay, so, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.